So planning on visiting Sri Lanka. This video will tell you everything you need to know to have a great time travelling the country.
We're Megan Morgs and we've spent the last 4 weeks travelling Sri Lanka. From the highlands to the beaches, it really is an amazing country and we're hoping we can help you visit too. We're going to start off by telling you everything that you need to know to plan your trip. So currency in Sri Lanka is Sri Lankan rupees. When we were there it was about 400 rupees to £1 Great British pound.
We used a great currency conversion app that we downloaded from the App Store. Then you can sort of get a good idea about how much you're spending. So the best time to visit Sri Lanka is between December and April. And this is just so that you're working around the main monsoon seasons. So the north and the east have a monsoon season from October till January, and then the southwest has a monsoon season from sort of April, May time until August, September time. So just bear this in mind when you're booking for your trip.
Visas for Sri Lanka, you've got two main options. You can either apply online or have visa on arrival. Both really quick and easy. Either is absolutely fine, and it cost us around £21 for our visa for 30 days. We didn't have to print off our visa at all. It was all in the system ready for when we arrived, so nice and easy.
Yeah, this is different than some other countries where sort of they like to have more paperwork, but we just turned up, haven't printed things off, thinking that they might want it. They said, no problem, it's all in the system, you don't need anything. So plug adapters for Sri Lanka, we'd recommend taking a universal plug adapter with you, just because they use either D or G plug sockets. So if you're from the UK, that could be very useful, because sometimes they use the same ones that we have back at home, but other times they have this 3 circular pronged one, which we hadn't seen before. And yeah, that's why it's so useful to have the universal plug adapter, just so you can be flexible between what you're using.
There's also a number of apps that you'll want to download on your phone to have readily available. So to book accommodation, you have booking.com, Agoda and Hostelworld. We primarily use booking.com, but it's good to have all three just to assess prices and options available. You'll also want to download Google Maps. If you don't have access to 4G, it's always great to download offline maps so you still know where you're going. Gives you sort of a sense of security that you wouldn't otherwise have. You can also use Google Maps to figure out which buses you need to get from certain places. Gives you the bus number and sort of length of time that it's going to take as well.
On the topic of transport, you'll only really need the Pick Me app. So Pick Me is like their rideshare app, and it sort of can give you a good price on how much it will cost to get a tuk-tuk or private car from where you are to where you need to go. This can also be quite handy when bartering with tuk-tuk drivers if you're not 100% sure on what the price should be. The final app that you want to have downloaded is a currency conversion app. This will just be useful for you to work out exactly how much you're spending on things during the day. For languages spoken, in the north and some central regions they primarily speak Tamil, and for the rest of the country they speak Sinhala. It's always useful to maybe know what please, thank you, or this was very nice, etc. just so that you can sort of communicate with the locals, and they really appreciate it.
If you do struggle though, body language and a smile goes a really long way.
Before visiting the country, we were quite concerned about whether we'd be able to take our drone or not, because the information that we saw online seemed a bit misleading. However, if you do want to take your drone, don't be worried. We saw plenty of other tourists with their drone. We got ours through security with no problems.
Morgan also flew it near some policemen who we just had a friendly chat with. They didn't even mention it.
Yeah, so there's no issues. And also you can apply, I think, for a permit through the government. So I think you tell them where you're going to be flying the drone, on what days, on what times.
And what drone.
And what drone you have, yeah, because I think the different sizes makes a big difference about whether you can take it in the country or not. The DJI mini drones, being under 250 grams, for general global travel, make it really easy to sort of get them through customs because they don't require registrations often.
One thing you might notice when you get to Sri Lanka is the discrepancy in costs of different activities for locals as opposed to tourists. I mean, we didn't mind at all. The way we see it, it allows locals to be able to visit things close to home, and also there's a big discrepancy in income as well.
We just want to stress that Sri Lanka in 2023 felt completely safe to travel. We had no issues when we were in the country, but obviously you need to check your government advice websites before leaving. The people were so nice, so welcoming, so lovely, and we had the best time. So don't let what you see on the news maybe put you off.
We thought we would run through what you should pack for your trip to Sri Lanka, just to make sure that you don't forget any of the essentials. We found certain toiletries really hard to get a hold of. The sun cream, we got burnt a few times.
Yeah, it's a bit
just by putting it on multiple times. So I definitely packed some good sun cream, some good bug spray. There's a lot of mosquitoes.
In terms of clothing, Sri Lanka is hot and humid. Probably don't sort of pack the cotton clothes that you would at home. Pack things like that are breathable, like polyester, those sorts of items that will allow you to sort of stay cool.
As far as clothes go as well, make sure you have lots of different options if you are considering going to temples. You know, something that can cover your shoulders and your knees for both women and men as well.
Yeah. I had one time where we went to a temple and I was wearing shorts. This didn't run with the locals and I ended up in a lovely blue sarong.
If in doubt, follow what the locals are wearing and be respectful.
But, I mean, sarongs are easily available at a price, so if you don't want to pack trousers, you'll easily be able to rent one when you're there. Or buy one when you're there.
Yeah. Something we definitely recommend taking is a snorkel. I mean, the amount of times that we were able to go in and swim with sea turtles, it was honestly invaluable. But don't worry if you don't have one, you can also rent these along the beachfront.
One thing that will be useful for you to take is either a waterproof jacket, but I'd probably recommend a waterproof poncho. Really lightweight, and you can just put it in your day bag just so you don't get caught out in any of the storms. There were some insane storms when we were around, and a couple of times we got fully drenched.
Yeah.
These storms will probably last for about 20 minutes, half an hour, but it was an absolute deluge of water.
Don't worry about overpacking either. There's laundry options available everywhere, and we got ours done a few times for really cheap.
When packing, you obviously need to decide what you're going to pack your items in. We travelled with a backpack. We found this really useful for public transport, especially where there isn't sort of the room to get a suitcase on the bus or onto the train. However, if you are sort of travelling in a more luxury style, a suitcase will be fine to go into the back of taxis or the more sort of like the AC type buses, the private ones, where sort of they're more geared for tourists. Just something to consider for when you come, because if you're sort of trying to travel on all the local transport and in tuk-tuks and things like that, a backpack will make your life a hell of a lot easier. So you've got all the information you need, you're packed and you're on your flight, likely into Colombo International Airport. The first thing that you want to do when you land is get some currency. We saw there were currency vendors as soon as you walk out of the terminal. They all sort of offered exactly the same price, so if you've got cash that you want to change, you can do it there. Alternatively, we use a travel card, so if you sort of go to the left-hand side of these vendors, there's a number of different ATMs. When using your travel card, make sure to reject the conversion that they give you, as your travel card will give you the best rates. We use this particular ATM, which I'll show you now, and that didn't give us any excess charges.
The next thing that we would recommend doing is getting yourself a SIM. So we actually got one between the two of us. It cost $8 for 28 days. That's 1.5 gigabytes of data a day with unlimited social media. That was perfectly enough for us, and coverage was actually pretty good.
Another thing I'd seen recommended was the fact that maybe get a couple of different SIMs. So one of you, for example, get an Airtel SIM, and the other, there was like a Mobitel, which seemed like they were the largest brand. If you've got one of each, then maybe your coverage will be better, and you can make sure that you've got connection to the internet everywhere that you go.
Depending on what time you get in and what sort of traveller you are, you may spend a night in the city near the airport before you get stuck into your travelling. So you'll either be staying in Negombo or Colombo. There's a few different transport options that you can get from the airport to your accommodation, and we'll go through them now.
So the first and obviously most obvious will be a taxi. These are obviously also going to be the most expensive. We split a taxi with some guys that we met in the airport, and that was $20 for the four of us, and that took us into the heart of Colombo. This doesn't seem like a bad price, however I think this was quite inflated, but we were happy to pay it because it was the middle of the night and we were exhausted.
Your next option, if you've already downloaded the Pick Me app, is to order a lift through there. So you've got different options. You can get a taxi with aircon or a tuk-tuk, and it will give you a good idea of what price you should be paying.
Finally, when we left the airport in the first place, we saw that there was a local bus picking up local people from the airport and likely taking them to Colombo or Negombo. This would be the cheapest option. However, I would probably take a taxi or something else if you're arriving in the middle of the night, just because you won't be very accustomed to your surroundings.
There were also tuk-tuk drivers waiting just outside the gate, so if you do the short walk from the airport outside the boundary, it will be a lot cheaper than the taxi drivers waiting right in arrivals.
So Negombo is slightly closer to the airport, about a 20-minute drive, whereas Colombo is about a 40-minute drive away. However, it doesn't really matter which one you stay in because both are well connected.
Next section that we're going to talk about is transportation and how you can get around Sri Lanka.
We found Sri Lanka incredibly easy to get around. The public transport networks are really well connected and everyone's super friendly. If you need sort of any advice, they'll help you out.
Just ask.
So the main modes of transport that we used were buses, trains and tuk-tuks. And like we said before, we only took the one private taxi from the airport to our accommodation in Colombo.
Your other method of transportation available to you is to either rent a tuk-tuk or a motorcycle. Now, we didn't really see much of this apart from the south coast when people were using it to beach hop. We never found it necessary because it was so easy to get the public buses and so much cheaper. If you are wanting to rent a motorcycle, we'd always recommend that you've got an international driving licence.
I can't imagine you get into any problems in Sri Lanka just because of how chilled out everyone was, including the police, but it's always good to have just to keep you covered.
The buses. Now, no two bus rides were ever the same. Hot, sweaty, windy.
And often busy.
But it's an experience, you know, ride with the locals, very cheap and also very easy to get. So to buy a ticket, just get on the bus and sit down. Then the vendor will come around and issue you your ticket.
Make sure you get on the bus quickly. These guys are in a rush.
Yeah.
They're always like, come on, get on, get on, get on, get on. Like they're in a rush to leave. Dump your bags in the sort of luggage carry bit at the front and then go get a seat.
We never had any issues leaving our bags at the front section, even sometimes when they were out of sight, but we did always keep our valuables on us, so on our laps or above our heads. It was only sort of our big bags that we left at the front next to the driver.
If you're planning on using the buses, then we would recommend that you're using a backpack for your luggage, just because these are much easier to get into the storage compartment at the front of the bus and you won't be causing anyone any problems with a big, bulky, heavy suitcase.
As mentioned before, if you aren't sure which bus route that you need to be getting, just check on Google Maps. It will tell you the number of the bus that you're looking out for, or ask a local. I mean, they're so friendly and happy to help. They'll definitely be able to advise.
And this is continued with the conductors. We only felt that we ever got overcharged once. This was on the south coast. This is a really small amount of money. We didn't worry about it at the time and don't worry about it.
Your next main method of public transport is the train network. Really great, and we actually preferred it to the buses as well. Not that much more expensive than a bus ride, but it's just a lot more comfortable. So there's 3 classes of tickets available. First class is sort of aircon, reserved seats. You need to book these in advance, but we never felt that we needed them. Your next class is second, so no aircon, but you've got fans going and the windows open. Third class is unreserved, and that's a general seat. So these are the cheapest. Not a huge difference in cost between second and third. This is where most of the locals ride, and we'll put a video on to show just how busy this class can get.
So we prefer travelling in second class just because you get a sort of a feel of a local experience, you get some nice interactions with locals, rather than sort of paying the extortionate amount for first class, which is definitely sort of targeted at tourists. Don't worry if you haven't packed any snacks for your train journey. There's loads of vendors selling something delicious like a samosa, nuts, and then obviously your classic things like biscuits and cold drinks.
Buying your train tickets is super easy. We just bought them at the station on the day of the train ride without any issue throughout. Now just make sure that you are going right up to the train window. If you're not sure where that is, follow the locals or ask somebody. One thing I would recommend, don't go to the tourist office. These are plug in the first class tickets so that they can make some commission.
Some of the best activities in Sri Lanka are just to get on the train ride itself. The Kandy to Ella train is world famous and arguably one of the best train rides in the world.
For this train ride, we actually broke it up into two, and I would recommend that you do the same thing. Otherwise, it's a 7 to 8 hour journey, and that's a very long, sweaty day.
Also, this gives you the opportunity of visiting the beautiful Nuwara Eliya, somewhere that often gets missed on the way sort of from Kandy to Ella. However, when we visited, we loved it. It was one of our favourite places in the whole country.
Top tip, the train from Nuwara Eliya to Ella, make sure you're sitting on the left-hand side to get the views.
So the final mode of transport that we used was tuk-tuks. Like we said before, you can always check Pick Me if you're in the bigger towns and cities, so you can work out what a good price for your ride would be. If not, don't worry, you can just go up to the tuk-tuk rider. You'll probably have a good idea by that point about how much your trip should cost per kilometre that you're going, and you can barter them down. Often the first price that they'll give you, because you're a tourist, is going to be quite inflated. I would probably take this down half, maybe less, to sort of give them a room to sort of barter from.
One thing we would always recommend is set the price before you get in. That way you've got no unexpected costs on the other end of the journey. One thing I would say as well, don't be afraid to take the tuk-tuks. They're so skilled and they drive in these roads every single day. So take one, experience driving like a local and have fun with it as well.
These tuk-tuks are these guys' businesses, so don't be worried because they're not going to put their livelihood at risk. Also, you should get used to the tuk-tuk. Do you want a tuk-tuk? Do you want a tuk-tuk? Every 5 minutes as you're walking down the street. This is just because this is their business. Try not to get too annoyed.
Also bear in mind that it hasn't been the easiest few years for these people. They're just trying to make some money and earn what they've lost from the drop in tourism.
So yeah, just be polite and say no thank you, we're having a walk, and then you can come back to them later if you need a tuk-tuk anyway.
If there's a tuk-tuk driver that you get on with relatively well, it might be worth taking their contact number for WhatsApp. We did this a few times and then we texted them to arrange further lifts that we needed in that area.
Also, lots of them are very knowledgeable about the local area. They've probably lived there their whole life, and they can take you on a great day tour that you can have pre-arranged for a real cheap price, where they'll take you around all the best spots. So the next category, food. The Sri Lankans make some great food, so you don't need to be worried.
Often trying the different cuisine is one of the best ways to learn about a country, and we're going to give you some recommendations for what you should definitely try for your time in Sri Lanka.
Luckily, on one of our first nights when we were staying in Kandy, we were having breakfast at our hotel with a couple of local girls, and they gave us all their best recommendations of things to try. So the first thing I would suggest you try is kotu. So you can get sort of like a chicken kotu, seafood, or you can have it vegetarian, egg, etc. Loads of different options, and then they'll sort of ask you the spice level that you like. This will be the same across all the food that you have in Sri Lanka. They'll see that you're a tourist and see maybe they won't like it as spicy as us locals, and then they'll ask, do you want it spicy, medium, or just kind of like plain.
One of our other favourite dishes when we were there was rice and curry. Absolute classic, and often they give you sort of a variety of different curries, which we really enjoyed because it meant we got to try more than just one.
Yeah, you can ask whoever's made it for you, oh, what's in this, what's in this, what's in this, and everything's super flavourful, often spicy, but tastes amazing. For a snack, as I said before, the samosas are brilliant. I also had egg rolls and egg rotis. They were brilliant, sort of just if you're in a rush, maybe you need to pick up a little something for lunch. Some notable breakfast items as well. We had hoppers, so they were made out of rice flour and coconut milk, and they often were filled with a number of different sweet treats like honey, maybe banana, and also sometimes they do a sort of like a fried egg in them as well.
Another thing that you see loads of tourists drinking, the classic King coconut, and they're nice and cheap.
Yeah, they are nice and cheap and very refreshing on a warm day. It's super humid and it's good to sort of get your fluid levels up. Plus, it's always good to try something new.
One thing we did notice, it was very accessible to eat as a vegetarian or a vegan in Sri Lanka. They primarily use coconut milk in most of their curries, which naturally makes it vegan, but also you've got the option in all of the restaurants pretty much to choose exactly what you want in your meals.
In terms of choosing where to eat, we use Google Maps and their review system to work out where was the best place. We always look for something that had sort of some recent reviews where people saying the food was great and like a 4.5 star or higher. This meant that we could sort of go there, eat and be sure that we wouldn't get ill. I'm sure this wouldn't be a problem anywhere in Sri Lanka, but we just wanted to be sure. I was able to eat meat the whole time that we're there. Megan was vegetarian, but I had no issues in my stomach eating the local food.
If it is somewhere where you are questioning maybe the hygiene standards, eat vegetarian and play it safe. Another thing that we would also recommend that you're careful with is the water. Being from the UK, we're maybe not necessarily used to the bacteria that might be found in some of the water sources. To get around this, we travel with a live straw bottle. I know there's lots of other options out there for a filtered drinking system. You can also buy bottled water, but we prefer having our own, just so we're not increasing our plastic consumption, and also it gives us a peace of mind.
Throughout the country there is the opportunity to buy beer or any other forms of alcohol. This will be sort of in a separate part of the supermarket, or obviously you can get it at the bars. Now this isn't something that we did when we were in Sri Lanka. We sort of just didn't drink, but we saw that it was probably around 400-500 rupees for a beer, sort of buying that from the supermarket, so pretty cheap. And cocktails were a little bit more expensive, maybe around 1,000 rupees for a cocktail. The
beer that most tourists were drinking as well was Lion beer. That was the most popular Sri Lankan brand. Next up, we're going to talk about the different accommodation options available for you and how much they may cost. Now, as mentioned previously, we booked all of our accommodation through booking.com. We looked for good reviews, aircon, and also Wi-Fi available. Most of the time, we opted for breakfast included. This just sort of saved us on our food costs for the rest of the day and meant we didn't have to worry about breakfast.
Wherever we were, there seemed to be a load of great options on booking.com with great reviews and lovely families at usually homestays where we stayed. Accommodation wasn't something that we wanted to skimp on, and in these rooms we usually had a private room with an ensuite and all the facilities that you'd need, and this usually came to around £10 per night for the both of us. So even with breakfast included, that's an absolutely amazing deal. And everyone that you're sort of staying with at the homestays is so lovely. They'll attend to your every need and always ask sort of what you need if you need anything. Another thing as well, they might help arrange transport for you. Just keep an eye on this because they might sort of try and jack the price up, so just so they can sort of make a little bit of money on the side by getting their friend to take you to places. We don't blame them for this, of course, but just something to keep an eye on so that you get a good price.
Often when using booking.com, we actually then had to pay cash at the homestay. So just check if it's taken any money out of your bank. It was something that we didn't expect, and maybe factor it in when you are taking cash out. You might need slightly more than expected.
As European tourists, we usually expect to have paid for the hotel before we arrive. This is just something that we've become accustomed to. But at the homestays, they like for you to pay at the end, just in case you have any extra things, like if you have dinner with them, if you sort of have tea and coffee a couple of times during the day, then it all gets put up in an itemised bill and you pay at the end of your stay. So you know everything you need to know about going to Sri Lanka. Now we're going to give you our 4 and 2 week itineraries so you can make the most out of your trip.
To be honest, we wouldn't recommend that you go for less than 2 weeks if possible, just because there is so much to see and you want to do this amazing country justice.
So to start off, you probably want to spend just one night in Colombo or Negombo. You can even spend no nights and go straight from where you are to where you want to be. It just depends what time you arrive at the airport. From Colombo, we'd recommend getting the train straight to Kandy.
In Kandy, we'd recommend spending 2 nights, and that gives you 1 full day there to explore the various temples and also do a lap of the lake. It's really nice.
Also, it's another sort of like big town, so you can sort of get any supplies that you might need for the rest of your trip.
From Kandy, we would then recommend taking a bus up to Dambulla before swapping and taking another bus to Sigiriya. So you'll spend 1 night here and you'll choose to do either Lions Rock or Pidurangala Rock, depending on your budget and what works best for you.
So after your night in Sigiriya, you'll get the bus back to Dambulla and spend a night there where you can do the Dambulla Cave Temple, which is world famous.
Once you've spent a night in Dambulla, you can get the train up to Trincomalee. So this is on the east coast and it's a nice fishing town. They do a lot of surfing there. We'd recommend 3 nights.
So after your time in Trincomalee, you want to be trying to get yourself down to Nuwara Eliya. So this will be probably a long travel day, getting yourself from Trincomalee on the bus to Dambulla, then from Dambulla to Kandy and Kandy to Nuwara Eliya. We'd recommend if this is too long for you, just stay over for a night in Kandy because this itinerary's got 26 days, so it gives you a bit of leeway.
Your travel options from Kandy to Nuwara Eliya, you can get the bus, which is slightly quicker, and we opted for the train, which was a bit longer, but it was a bit more comfortable as well. Once you're in Nuwara Eliya, we'd recommend 2 nights here. We really loved Nuwara Eliya. It was a bit quieter, lots to do there for a full day, and the people are just so friendly.
It's also a bit of a break from the heat and humidity. It's usually well above 30 degrees in most places you'll visit in Sri Lanka. However, in Nuwara Eliya, it topped out at about 25 degrees and the humidity was much less.
Once you've spent your time in Nuwara Eliya, you're going to be getting the Instagram famous Kandy to Ella train. As mentioned before, grab a seat on the left hand side and head over to Ella. We'd recommend 3 nights in Ella. There's loads to do here. It is a bit more touristy, but we actually enjoyed it. Loads of food options available. So there's lots to do in Ella. You've got lots of different hiking options. There's lots of waterfalls nearby, and it's also a great opportunity to meet lots of travellers like you.
So after your time in Ella, you'll be getting the bus down to Tissa. Tissa is a great place for you to do a safari to Yala National Park. There are a number of different options for doing a safari. However, if you're sort of travelling to the south coast, then Tissa is the best way for you to get there, as afterwards you can get the bus down to Matara.
You'll be spending 1 night in Tissa, and the next morning you'll be waking up super early to do a half-day safari in Yala National Park. So get an early night and get ready, because hopefully you're going to see some leopards. The same day after your safari, you will be heading down to the south coast. So we would recommend stopping at Tangal.
Yes.
Breaks up the journey, and it's also a very quaint fishing town. Not a lot of tourists go there, but we thought it was just so nice and beautiful. Be warned though, the waves are choppy.
Yeah, go in if you're confident. If not, just enjoy from afar, maybe dip your toes in. But they have a beautiful long arching beach that goes all the way around, and there's barely anybody there, so you'll have it all to yourself to enjoy.
After spending 2 nights in Tangal, get the bus along the south coast to Hirakatia. Now this was also one of our favourite places, and we'd recommend spending 2 to 3 nights here depending on your itinerary. It's a stunning cove, the water's really calm, so it's perfect to go in and swim if you're not as confident, and it's also a great spot to do some surfing.
After Hirakatia, head over to Marissa. Marissa is probably the hub of the south coast, has tons to do, it's super touristy, but that just means that you've got plenty of options for things to do, places to eat.
In terms of transport, you'll be getting 2 buses from Hirakatia to Marissa, most likely swapping at Matara. Don't worry, this is really easy. We just asked the local which bus we should get on next.
If this is a bit too much for you, just jump in a private taxi or tuk-tuk. It's going to be a lot more expensive, but it'll save you any extra hassle.
One thing not to miss in Marissa is the amazing snorkeling at Turtle Beach. Swim with sea turtles and spend your sunset at Coconut Hill. There's great views here and really is something special.
After your 3 nights in Marissa, head over to Welagama, where you can get a surf lesson. This is one of the more popular things to do there.
It's also a big party place as well, so if that's something that you're interested in, drinking with other like-minded backpackers, this is probably the place for you. So maybe take that into account and spend an extra night here.
Final stop on the south coast is Unawatuna. We'd recommend spending 3 nights here, and we really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
There's a number of different beaches like Mirapena Beach, Dalawela Beach, and also there's a little beach called Turtle Beach where we swam with some giant sea turtles. It was pretty surprising because we didn't see anything on Google Maps about it. We sort of turned up to the beach, saw a couple of people with snorkeling, and then boom, out of nowhere, some giant sea turtles. We definitely recommend doing that, and again, local buses are your friend. Just go around there, no problems. You can also get the bus on a day trip to Gaul and visit the famous Gaul Fort. That was a really nice way to spend a morning.
We chose to stay in Unawatuna as opposed to Gaul as well. Just made it a bit easier in terms of check-in and check-out of accommodation, and it was really easy. It took about 15 minutes on the bus, so not bad at all for a day trip.
The final stretch of your journey after your 3 nights in Unawatuna will be getting the train from Gaul back to Colombo so you can fly out of the country. This was really easy to do, cost about 500 rupees each.
Just make sure to give yourself plenty of time. I mean, the last thing that you want to do is end your holiday with a stressful situation racing to the airport.
Plus, the train journey from Galle to Colombo was super beautiful. We were quite taken aback and surprised about how close the train went to the ocean, and you had ocean views for the majority of your journey.
We'd also recommend to sit on the left-hand side for the ocean views. As we've gone through it all in a lot more detail for the 4-week itinerary, we'll very quickly run through what we would recommend for 2 weeks travelling Sri Lanka.
So ideally, once you land in Colombo, because you'll be shorter on time, you'll get the train from Colombo on your first day. You'll spend 1 night there before heading off to Dambulla and then Sigiriya for night 2.
After spending a night in Sigiriya and seeing the lions or Pidurangala Rock, we'd then recommend having a long travel day all the way down to Nuwara Eliya. So get the bus to Dambulla, the bus then to Kandy, and either the bus or train to Nuwara Eliya. You'll spend 2 nights here before heading further south to Ella by the train.
In Ella, you'll spend 3 nights hiking, enjoying the surroundings, going to some waterfalls, before then heading down to Tissa on the bus for your Yale National Park safari. That same day, then you'll head down on the bus to the south coast.
As you are shorter on time, we'd recommend you going from Tissa all the way down to Hirakatia, where you'll spend 2 nights before moving further along the south coast to Marissa.
After your 2 nights in Marissa, you'll then head further along the south coast to Unawatuna, where you can spend another 2 nights before then heading off to Galle and getting your bus back to Colombo on your final day.
We really hope that you found these 2 and 4-week itineraries useful. Also, bear in mind you can chop and change it depending on what suits you best.
So that should be everything you need to know for taking a trip to Sri Lanka from 2023 onwards. Let us know if there's anything else you'd like to know in the comments below, and we'll be happy to get back to you.
If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and if you're interested in seeing what we get up to in country number 2, which is India, then make sure to keep an eye out for those videos. They'll be coming shortly.
You can keep up to date with us in real time on our Instagram at Megan Morgs as well, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.